So let us recap. now. Reb Chaim demonstrated yesterday that the sweep, the parameters, the innovation, the chiddush in the sugya of roideif is not merely to devalue the life of the roideif to enable us to ignore the normal rule of ein doiche nefesh mipnei nefesh. It's not merely simply just giving us the license to devalue one life, but it's the chiddush of roideif is far broader than that. And what it is as follows. It posits, it creates an entirely new category of chiyuv of hatzalah of the nefesh hanirdaf, even if it will be at the expense of the life of the roideif. Okay, that's the definition. Got it clear? Mm-hmm. And he brought various proofs to that. Say that again. The chiddush of the sugya of roideif is to create a new obligation of hatzalah in the case of a roideif and nirdaf, not the regular chiyuv of hatzalah, which we're going to learn from v'chai b'hem, as we'll see, right? Why am I mechal Shabbos to save somebody's life? Nothing to do with roideif. I'm mechal Shabbos to save somebody's life because of, we're going to see shortly, a pasuk of v'chai b'hem v'lo shayomus b'hem, right? That imperative of hatzalas nefashos, which applies across all isurim, and which hits a brick wall when it comes to to forfeit somebody else's life because of the svara of ein doiche nefesh mipnei nefesh, that chiyuv of hatzalah is overshadowed, if you like, by an entirely new category, a new chiyuv of hatzalah, which is created by the sugya of roideif, that you have to save the life of the nirdaf, even if it is at the expense of the roideif. That is Reb Chaim's definition of the sugya of roideif. And he brought various proofs which we're not going to go over, ben noyach, etc. Now, as a result of which, he said, sorry, I've lost my place here. As a result of which he said, he also pointed out, for example, that roideif applies not just in the case of forfeiting a life. It's in the case, this roideif applies even the chiyuv of hatzalah of a nirdaf applies even if it's for aroyos. Remember, so it's a whole different. It's a whole different category. Now, an ubar is a nefesh, says Reb Chaim. The Dasa Rambam, Shaloi Karashi. An uber is a nefesh. And therefore, if we were to look at a situation of a roideif which involves an uber, if it was just under the rubric of the general chiyuv of hatzalah of v'chai b'hem, then the ein doiche nefesh mipnei nefesh would also apply. We couldn't do it. But because there is a new chiyuv of hatzalah of a nirdaf, a chiyuv of hatzalah of a nirdaf, which is even at the expense of the life of a roideif, therefore, by establishing, listen to what he's done, it's subtle but it's so brilliant, by the Rambam establishing that the uber is a roideif, it is that which allows us to be choitech oisei when it is inside the mother, choitech oisei, because he's a roideif. He's a roideif. That's why we save her life by forfeiting his life. What is left for us to explain is the next part, which is, he pops his head out, well, all of a sudden he's not a roideif, and the Gemara says, yeah, it seems he's not a roideif. Mishamayim dekorad fila. Pardon, he was a roideif inside and not outside. Here's where so this was stage one. Reb Chaim's established the parameters of the chiyuv of hatzalah. He's established that in this new chiyuv of hatzalah, an uber absolutely can be categorized as a roideif, and that's why when he is challenging the life of the mother, we cut him up. That's where we're up to. That was just a quick summary, a review. Let's go on. Now it's going to get more challenging, because we have to We have to go to dodge more bullets along the way. V'yisoid davazeh. We're doing the second paragraph. It starts with the words v'yisoid. Everybody got it?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Fasten your seatbelts. Let's go. V'yisoid davazeh nireh nilmad. Where do we learn this concept, this fundamental idea from? Mishum dahareha de pikuach nefesh deicha kol ha'torah kula hoyalfinu lo b'yuma daf pehem mikroda v'chai b'hem v'lo sheyamus b'hem. The regular halacha, the regular chiyuv of Hatzalah is learned from v'chai b'hem v'lo sheyamus b'hem. V'im kein kol shenichlal b'chlal v'chai b'hem. Any entity to which we can apply the imperative of live is doicha es ha'isurin, and as a result of which it overrides chilul Shabbos, eating treif, etc. Any entity, any form of life, I'm using my words carefully, any level or form of life which we can identify under the rubric of v'chai bohem, continue living, sustain that level of life. See what I just did there? Mm-hmm. That was very subtle. It doesn't even need to be considered an entire life. But if there is life, life could be a spectrum. V'chai bohem tells me, keep this entity going. Keep this entity going. Therefore, if an Uber is included in V'chai Bohem, so much so that you are Mechalel Shabbos for an Uber, and then it is enough of a nefesh not to be overridden with, because Ein Deich Nefesh Mipnei Nefesh.
Yeah.
Outside of a Roidev situation, forget Roidev. Again, you'll see where he's building this up. We learned it from any entity that is included in this imperative to continue living, as a result of which it overrides all other Isurim in the Torah, that means that entity is not subject to having its chiyus forfeit for somebody else. Okay? Mm-hmm. So what is going to be our classic source for deciding whether an Uber qualifies as a nefesh in this regard? There is a machlekes rishonim how to understand a Mishnah in Yuma Daf Pei Beis. Ubra shehi richa. A pregnant woman smells something on Yom Kippurim. She smells something which we are assuming it creates a craving which is life-threatening. That's the scenario. She's pregnant. She gets a craving to eat, which is an incredibly strong one, to the point that her life is in danger. Okay? That's a fact. Uvda. Those are the facts we are stating. Yeah, good question. But that is bulmus, whatever the Gemara discusses. But this is the scenario I'm presenting you with. That's the reality. The reality is we have a pregnant woman who now needs to eat, and it's a sakonas nefashos. The Mishnah paskins. This is a Mishnah in Yuma Daf Pei Beis. Ubra shehi richa. A pregnant woman who smells something. Ma'achilin oisa. You feed her on Yom Kippurim and shetoshuv nafsha until she's okay. She's okay again. Now, the Nechleku Harishonim says Reb Chaim, there's a massive machlekes rishonim in that Mishnah. Who is in danger here? Imu machmas sakonas ubar, ay machmas sakonas ha'im. There's a machlekes rishonim how to understand that Mishnah. Okay, so let's look at each possibility. Ulahanoch. Those Rishonim who learn that this is not because of the sakon of the mother, but it is the viability of the baby, of the fetus that is challenged here. Well, if that is the case in the Mishnah, then what do you see very clearly? Harei mavur, so it is evident. De uber gamkein nichlal bichlal v'chai bohem lidchos eso isurim mipnei pikuach nafshay. There you have an absolute, unimpeachable source, a Mishnah. Those who will learn the Mishnah that it's the fetus that is in danger. So there you have clearly. That's absolute makor. Where Mechalel Yom Kippurim v'chai bohem clearly applies to a fetus. Game over. So it is a chai. It is enough of a life that for which we're Mechalel Yom Kippurim, and therefore, of course, if it then in another situation becomes a question of kill or be killed, then we have to can't do anything. Ein doich nefesh b'pnei nefesh. We have demonstrated it is a nefesh, right? So, lahanach desvilei du mipnei sakonas uber hari mavur. It is evident. Du uber gam kein b'chlal v'chai b'hem lidchos isur mipnei b'kuach nafshay v'im kein mi meila hari muchrach, and therefore it automatically follows that of course we're not going to override the viability of a fetus because of somebody else's life, obviously, because an uber is now deemed, that's if you learn the Mishnah that way, kiven de gamhu bichlal v'chai b'hem. That says the Reb Chaim, but maybe the Rambam doesn't take that view. Maybe the Rambam learns pshat in the Mishnah that who is in danger here, not the fetus but the mother. So then we don't have a source.
Yeah.
So he says, even if you're going to take that view, I'll still prove to you that a fetus is enough of a nefesh to be included in the regular obligation of a chai b'hem. Let's see how he does that. Even if you're going to tell me that the Rambam is of the opinion that the entity whose life is in danger over here is the mother and not the fetus, but we can still absolutely hold the position that an uber is a life. Why? How can you do that? If you're going to tell me that the Rambam learns pshat in that Mishnah in Yuma, that the reason that we feed this woman on Yom Kippurim is not because of the life of the fetus, and here he uses an interesting svara, that doesn't cross the threshold for v'chai bohem. Why? Look at the language he uses. Shaloi nigmar chiyusoi. His life is not complete. There is some life there, but it isn't complete. Maybe v'chai bohem tells me, possibly, only to maintain an already complete level of life. And maybe for that reason, the Rambam learns that you're mechalei Yom Kippurim for the mother and not for the fetus. Even if you're going to take that position, he says, but that is only insofar as my duty, me the mother, or me somebody else, my duty to, let's say the mother. Let's say the mother is in, according to, let's say the Rambam learns that the reason that the mother's mechalei Yom Kippurim is for herself, not for the baby. Why not? Because that baby cannot force me to override my chiyuv of Yom Kippurim, or my chiyuv to eat kosher, or that's not enough chiyus for that. That could be for another person to be doicha eso isurim, but that's a million miles away from saying aval le'inyan lias nidche. But maybe you could still logically hold the position that it is enough chiyus not to be killed. It's one thing to say that I don't have a chiyuv to be mechalel Yom Kippurim for that level of life, but it's quite another leap of faith to say that it is so little life that I will willingly abort it for somebody else's life. In other words, you cannot prove from this Mishnah that a fetus is not a nefesh insofar as forfeiting its life for somebody else. That you can't prove. You can't make that leap. Do you hear that? Mm-hmm. That you can't do. So he says, even if you want to say that the Rambam will learn that the reason we're mechalel Yom Kippurim is for the mother and not for the fetus, because it's not nigmar chiyusoi, but that's only lidchos ha'isurim, aval le'inyan lias nidcha gam uba b'chlal nefesh. We already have demonstrated that an uber is included in a nefesh. V'harei b'chlal v'chai b'hem le'inyan shlein lias nidcha b'fnei pikuach nefesh. And he's going to demonstrate it further. V'oid. Let's go back to our Mishnah in Arachin. V'oid de biyoshva ala mashber. What happens? Remember we said that the Mishnah says in Arachin that if a woman is chayiv misa, she is put to death even if she is pregnant.
We don't wait for the...
We don't wait.
Right.
But, remember the end of the Mishnah?
But...
If it's being born?
Oh, very good.
Right.
Yoshva ala mashber. Once the process of birth is started,
right.
she's on the...
We don't...
Then we wait. The Oid says Reb Chaim, to be Yoshua Lamash Beharim Muvu Barachin Dav Zayin Abu Gufa Acharino V'nigmar Chiyusei B'Anpei Nafshei. In other words, we consider once she's in labor, then we say that this level of chiyus is nigmar chiyusai. The chiyus it is deemed as its own entity of life. V'nigmar chiyusai b'am penafshei. Umavur sham oid de mechalin olavis haShabbos. The halacha is, by the way, you are mechalel Shabbos. Kobe, you with me? Yeah, you mechalel Shabbos for an Uber. Uberosh perik Yom Kippurim mavur da'af be'imoy chayom ikom kemechalel olavis haShabbos. We see, by the way, the Rosh says in Yom Kippurim, perik Yom Kippurim, that even if the mother is still alive, we are still mechalel Shabbos for a baby, given to chayhu ba'am penafsho v'delasu dachid baby, back to the baby in a box, because it has its own source of life, but there's a door in its way. V'imkein harei biyoshvar ala mashber. However, you're going to learn the Mishnah in Yuma about when she is pregnant. That is not when she's in labor. That's when she's pregnant. Says Reb Chaim, but you see from the Gemara in the Mishnah and Gemara in Arachin, v'imkein harei biyoshvar ala mashber. When she's in active labor, everybody would agree that a woman in labor, that fetus now certainly has crossed the threshold of having its own chiyus, and therefore we're mechal Shabbos for that person. Even if you want to learn in the Mishnah in Yuma that when she's pregnant, we're mechal Shabbos for her, Yom Kippurim for her, not for the fetus. That's only if it hasn't labored. It's not in labor. Once she's in labor, Yoshua la mashber, nigmar chiyusa. We say its chiyus is finished. Umi mela, therefore, eina nidchem pnei pikuach nefesh ta'cheret. Therefore, it isn't overridden for the pikuach nefesh of anybody else. So now we have a problem. So then why are we allowed, back to our original source, why are we allowed during labor to cut up the baby? You've just shown me that once she's al mashber, it's got its own status as nefesh. You have a chiyuv of a regular chiyuv, the regular chiyuv of hatzalah, and therefore you should not be able to forfeit its life. It should be ein nefesh mipnei nefesh. Comes along Reb Chaim now. This next line is the fridge magnet piece. Yeah, this is the crux of the matter. If you were highlighting, yeah, if there was Cliff's notes on Reb Chaim, lahavdil elef avdalas chas v'shalom. You know what I'm talking about? No, there's these things in America called Cliff's Notes. It's like when you're studying for your Abituri or thing. There are these apps and websites and little books which distill the key sentences in a thing. I don't know if you must have that thing over here as well. Whatever. It would be this. It would kind of be this. This is one of the key ones. Listen to this. Good man. Have highlighter, will travel. I never go anywhere without it.
Okay.
Now listen to this. This is astounding. We are now going to point out a leniency or stringency, depending which way you look at it, between the regular halach of Hatzalah and the roid of Chiv of Hatzalah. In the regular Chiv of Hatzalah, a baby that is in the process of being born is exactly the same as any other living being. Yoshua la mashber, you have to save the life, and that life, that chiyus, is not overridden by somebody else's life. We say ein nefesh mipnei nefesh. The funny thing is, as soon as Roidev comes into the picture, then all of a sudden that life is forfeit. What on earth is going on? Says Reb Chaim. And this is, I don't know if you appreciate what he's done. He's now going to just lay out the facts as per his analysis. You are therefore forced to say that when it comes to the chiyuv of Hatzalah for a nirdaf, an uber is treated differently. If I was only looking at it from the perspective of there's a baby being born and there's isurim need to be done, of course we do that. There's a baby in the process of being born and it's one life or versus another, I have to step back. But the minute you bring in not a kill or be killed situation, but roideif, then there's a leniency. Va'al korchoch mefarish Rambam duhu din mesuyim bedin hatzola ho'amura benirdef. There is a specific limitation in the din of hatzola, the chiyuv of hatzola, which is said by a nirdaf, that what? De uber nidche bifnei nefesh hagomor. In this new Chiyuv of Hatzalah, an Uber is treated differently. We don't necessarily know why. Reb Chaim is specializing in Vos State. In Yeshiva world, that's what we say. That's his Dos State. He's introduced and he's demonstrated there's a new Chiyuv of Hatzalah. And this Chiyuv of Hatzalah is now different. In the regular Chiyuv of Hatzalah, an Uber who's in the process of being born is considered a nefesh, such that I have to sit back and say, situation of kill or be killed, ein doich nefesh mipnei nefesh. But the new chiyuv of hatzalah of a nirdaf, that normally would obligate me to save the nirdaf, kill the roidef, yes? Save the nirdaf even in the situation of a roidef. This din masuyim, the din of hatzalah, which is said by a nirdaf, in that situation, we say, Uber nidcha bifnei nefesh hagomor. An Uber is pushed aside. Bifnei nefesh hagomor. A fetus is set aside. Ulahochi hu shechoit chinoisei b'hatzalah sa'im v'shani mikol pikuach nefesh ta'alma. It is different than any other regular pikuach nefesh. And that's why he says, Zeu shekosav ta'amo, shahareu karoideif achareho lahorka. So although he is a total nefesh, and certainly deemed and considered to be a total nefesh vis-a-vis the rest of the Torah, but when it comes to again, al koch mefarsh Rambam, du din mesuyim bedin hatzalah ha'amura benirdaf. The din hatzalah of a nirdaf tells me that uber nidcha bifnei nefesh hagomor. An uber is looked at differently than a nefesh hagomor, and that is why you cut him up. V'shani b'kol pikuach nefesh ta'alma. It's different to the regular pikuach nefesh, and that's why the Rambam says shaharehu karoidef achareho lahorka. He's a roidef. But then we have, if that's the so, let's do the last paragraph. Let's try and finish this off. It gets a little bit more complicated. But then we have a major internal problem, because the Gemara then goes on to say, do you remember Shemaya Koradfala? The Gemara goes on to say that seemingly he's not a Raidif, and that's always been our problem. Is he a Raidif? Isn't he a Raidif? So Rashi doesn't have a problem. Rashi says he's not a Nefesh. We, according to the Rambam, now have established he's a Raidif. If he's a Raidif, then when Misha Yotza Roishe, why is it any different? So the Gemara says because he's not a Raidif. Shemaya Koradfala. Make up your mind. Is he or is he not a Raidif? What's going on? Surely you don't become any more or less of a Raidif whether you've been born or not. That doesn't make any sense. Okay? If it comes because Shamaya Karadfala and therefore he's not a Raidif at all, and for that reason once he's born we don't touch him, that's the way to learn the Gemara. Therefore he is not a Raidif. So if he hasn't then been born, so then why are we allowed to kill him? Given that he's not a Raidif for Tzorachiyun. V'ashayira muchrach mizeh. Final piece, the final stretch, guys. V'ashayira muchrach mizeh. Therefore, we are obligated to say, de be'emes. Afal gav de mishmai. This is again classic Reb Chaim. Afal gav de mishmai koradfala. Even though the cause of the redifus doesn't emanate from the fetus, it's mishamayim. It's been orchestrated by Hashem. He is a roidef. He is still a roidef, except that normally with a roidef there is volition, there is cognizance, there is. Here it was totally. It's almost like he's the gun. What? Yeah, it's almost like it's almost. Mm-hmm. So, except that a gun has no chiyus. It's almost like it's a living. And by the way, this is an interesting. The Gemara discusses this. This is maybe not for now. What would be? Are you allowed to allow yourself to be pushed off a roof onto somebody else? It will. The famous trolley case in San Francisco. Yeah, that famous thing. Would you kill a fat man? Get that book, yeah, etc. All that sort of stuff. But yeah, that's what it's called. Google it. Get it on Amazon. Have it at home. It's about pushing the fat man off the bridge. The famous Philippa Foot whole scenario. No, trolleyology, you're not familiar with it?
Yeah, with the two.
The tube, it's more, that's only one.
Or, like,
we'll get to it at some point. You know, maybe we'll do this at some point. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. And it has to do with AI and Google self-driving cars. Do you buy the moral model? They have to build in moral model. Do you buy the self-driving car? What happens? It needs to have an algorithm as to what happens when it faces there's a crash coming that can kill the old person or the young person. They have to build. They're doing it now. Google have been dealing with this since 2015. Never mind. We'll do it later. We'll talk about this another time. It's connected. No, and the reason I'm bringing this in is because it's discussed what happens if this is a Gemara already. Can you allow yourself to be pushed off a roof? Not that you want to. You're pushed off a roof. You are like the stone, or that you're a living stone, a living gun, and you're pushed off. You trample a kid below, breaks your fall. You live, the kid dies, but you're pushed. Do you have to resist and say "Ein dech nefesh mipnei nefesh"? So you're a roideif, and what happens? Can somebody shoot you or push you out the way when you're on the way? Yeah, deflecting the arrow, the famous case, Chazon Ish, Twin Towers, blah blah. Okay, right, shooting down the plane with the World Trade Center. Would the U.S. Army, the Air Force, they did scramble jets. Let's say they would have got them. Would they have been allowed to shoot down the jet to save the greater number of lives? And this is a side sugya. We might touch on it. Mm-hmm. So I'm showing how these ancient scenarios, it's mentioned in Yerushalmi and Trumas, are live today. Mishmar HaGvul are at a bus stop and they can see there's a terrorist getting on the bus, and you can shoot him now before he presses the trigger, but he might hit one or two people as well and kill them as well. Or does he let him get on the bus? Those people go away, but then 50 people blow up. These are real shilas. It's not a joke. Mm-hmm. So says Reb Chaim, this Uber, it's Mishamaya Karatfala. It's orchestrated from Shamayim, but that doesn't mean to say the kid isn't a Roidef. The Uber is still a Roidef. He has a din of Roidef, but maybe without the culpability of Roidef. Yeah. So look what he says. We have established that the main point, the din of the Roidef, is to save this new chiyuv of saving the Nirdaf. Why do we say that in this new sugya of Roidef, where there's a new chiyuv hatzalah, we forfeit the life of the Roidef? Why? Because there a certain amount of chiyuv attaches to the roidef. This element of saying mishamaya karadfala removes the element of chiyuv from the roidef. So we end up with a roidef without the din roidef, because of a lack of intent, because it's mishamaya. So he's still a roidef. He's still a roidef. It was a roidef inside, and he's a roidef outside. Makes no difference. Roidef is roidef. The chiyuv of hatzalas hanirdaf that overrides ein doichin nefesh mipnei nefesh is because there is some level of chiyuv attaches to the roidef. In this case, the Gemara says we take away that element of culpability of chiyuv because mishamaya karadfala. Umimela de daininan bei hod ein doichin nefesh mipnei nefesh. Aval bikol mokim ikadin roidef hatzalas nirdaf lepokim bezeh. There is still a chiyuv of this new chiyuv of hatzalah. Umimela de hod adin agaba uber de nidcha bifnei ha'im. Why? When it's inside, because it's not nigma chiyusai, in this new chiyuv of hatzalah, which overrides, which tells me to kill the nirdaf, mishum de bedin hatzalas nirdaf have a dinner do uber nidcha b'fnei nefesh ha'kamor, like you said before. An uber is treated differently in this new halacha. That's why we cut him up when he's inside. V'zeu disnan de actually yotzarei shechayit chinaisai. V'nafshay nidcha me'etzem din roidev. When it's inside, the nafshay is nidcha because it is not quite a nefesh hagomor yet. Mm-hmm. Therefore, that nefesh is nidcha even without the chiyuv. But once it's born and it's a total nefesh, then mishamaya koradfala removes the element of culpability, and therefore we're back to the regular halacha of hatzalas nefashos. Ein doichin nefesh mipnei nefesh. Yotza Reishay, so I have to desist. What he's done is absolute genius. He has managed to deftly weave his way And if you analyze what he's done, Lahavdil, I'm just trying to give you the conceptual basis. He has shown how each scenario, each Mishnah, each Gemara has its own parameters and definition. What he's done is he's deconstructed and drilled down till you get to the bare bones of what's really going on over here, and created a sugya of a chiyuv of hatzalas hanirdaf, which has certain parameters, in which if you are not quite born, even though you're a nefesh vis-a-vis the regular halacha of hatzalah, kol ha-Torah kula, but legabe this one, which enables you to be matzil the chiyuv, to matzil the nirdaf, even at the expense of the life of the roideif, that has to involve a level of chiyuv as well. Given mishamaya korad fela, therefore that level of chiyuv is absent, and therefore when it's not quite out, this new chiyuv of hatzalah doesn't apply. That's a limitation in this new chiyuv of hatzalah. Therefore, we cut him up. But once he is born, the fact that this mishamaya korad fela removes the chiyuv, and now they are both totally equal, equivalent nefashos. That removes the chiyuv of hatzalah, this chiyuv of hatzalah, because he's a roidah, but he doesn't have the din of roidah once he's properly born. Why? Because mishamai korad fela. Okay, so then hodrodina, I have to go back to the normal chiyuv. The normal chiyuv ain't doich nefesh mipnei nefesh. It needs. I mean, this needs chazorah. Obviously, it needs. But I hope it has been a. And we're going to stop it here. We'll leave it here. There's much more to say, and we could have done it. There's more. And by the way, there's the Chazon Ish argues, and the Reb Chaim is Gedolei HaAchronim. That doesn't mean that there aren't those that argue. But it was more about demonstrating. It's about how you approach a sugya. It's about how you approach a halach and how you drill down till you got it at its source, and then you work its way back up. And then questions like we started with this, the Noach, the questions that you thought were questions are not questions, not because I have a good answer. The question wasn't valid is because you were actually comparing two tzvei, the famous two dinim. They're different. They're not actually at their source. They don't emanate from the same source. And we made, of course, they're treated differently. There never was a question to start with. Okay? That is the Reb Chaim.